think it's everyone in. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's club webinar. For those of you that don't know me, and I think that most of you probably do by now, but my name's Claire. I'm Clubs, Leagues and Schools Manager at Table Tennis England. Today's session will look at DBS checks, myths and facts, as you can see there on the screen, and is the last in the series of our safeguarding specials, I suppose. So I'm joined today by Judy Rogers, who's our Safeguarding and Ethics Manager. Before I hand over to Judy, just a couple of things. We will be recording today's session, so it will be made available on the website afterwards. And as always, I'll circulate a follow-up email afterwards with the key information as well. Of course, always welcome any questions. So either pop questions in the chat box, or wave at us, or pop your name in the chat box, and we can unmute you. And we can go through those as we go along. I will hand over to Judy. Thanks, Judy.
Thanks, Claire. I'm sure most of you know this already and you're getting bored with this slide. This is the third time of asking, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Safeguarding and Ethics Manager. My role is to ensure that we have in place all the policies and guidelines, staff members, anyone involved in table tennis, and that they're kept up to date and relevant to everything that we do. I also manage and investigate any live child protection cases, working with all the statutory agencies, and at times that may involve me having to go to court to give evidence. And I answer questions from clubs, leagues, counties, anybody who wants to know anything about safeguarding. And actually what we're covering today is something that I get asked more questions about since it was brought in some, I don't know, where are we now, but about 15 years ago, when we first introduced what was then CRB checks. I've had more questions on this than anything else. So hopefully we can sort some of those questions out. I've been doing this role now as of next week, 1st of July, 22 years. So I'm kind of hoping I might actually know what I'm doing soon. So what I'm going to do is take you through our fact sheet, which is actually on the website, because these are the questions that I'm asked more than anything else. So if I run through it, and then if in answering those questions there's something else that I haven't answered, or something you'd like just clarification on, put it in the chat box and we'll come back to it at the end. Okay, brilliant. Right, here we go. Right, well this is a very obvious one, but it's one that I'm asked more often than any others. I'm a coach, do I need a check? Well, the answer to that is very, very simply yes. In fact, if you're a coach within Table Tennis England, you need to have a coach license to be able to go out and carry out your coaching, and part of gaining the coach license is to have a DBS check in place, a current one. So what level of check does that need to be? Well, if you're working with young people or vulnerable adults, you must have an enhanced check. We do not accept basic checks. There is a very good reason for that, because on a basic check, it doesn't show you whether you've been checked against the barred list. So all it does is checks your convictions. So it has to be enhanced. I'm a club official and I handle information about our junior club members. Do I need a check? No, not unless you undertake direct responsibility for looking after the young people and meet the regulated activity criteria, which I'm coming on to in a second. So if all you are doing is updating records, then the answer is no, you do not need a check. And actually we can't ask you in law now to undergo a check. So what is regulated activity? Regulated activity includes all those activities which involve teaching, training, instructing, caring for or supervising children, or giving out guidance on advice on well-being, or driving a vehicle only for children. If it meets that, then it has to happen frequently. Now, it's defined as once a week or more. So the activity has to take place once a week or more. Or if it happens what we would call intensively, so 4 or more days in the period of a month. If it involves an overnight stay, then absolutely. So this is where, within table tennis, if you are taking out coaching or supervisory activities for young people once a week or 4 times a month, or at any point there is one overnight stay, and overnight is classed apparently as between 2 AM and 6 AM. Well, I would hope to think that no 8 or 9-year-olds are still up and about at 2 AM in the morning, but that is where it becomes classed as an overnight stay. Okay, so that is what is regulated activity. And I'm sure there's going to be some questions on that at the end. But who decides whether the activity is regulated and whether a check is needed? Well, it's a combination of ourselves. We are the employer, even if you're a volunteer, even if you are a club member. Ultimately, Table Tennis England would be classed as the employer. So it is us and GBG who are our regulated providers. So we decide whether or not an activity is regulated and whether or not a check is required. So who does need to be checked? Well, we've already said coaches, but also anyone who is regularly transporting young people, and this could be a parent. I know myself, as when my kids, they're all grown up now, but when they were little, I used to cart them around to all sorts of table tennis competitions. And I became the driver and the responsible adult, although we're going back now to the 1990s and 2000s, before all of this came in, for the junior team for our club. So I used to drive them. If I were doing that now, because I would be doing it every week, every other week, it would be classed as regulated activity, so I would need to be checked. If it's a parent who perhaps you've got a group of parents who work a rota system, so maybe they're only doing it once a month, then no, they don't need to be checked. What I would say is, at the end of the day, a DBS check is only a snapshot in time. It only tells you that on this day, you either did or didn't have convictions, okay? So it has to be used in with other things. So if you're using coaches, you should be following our guidelines in terms of recruitment. If it's a parent taking children once a month or now and again to an event to help out the club, then look at our travel guidelines, look at putting in place mitigation so that that person, and I think I've said this in some of the other webinars, they're not putting themselves at risk. So it's not just all about the children or the vulnerable adults, it's about the person not putting themselves in a situation where they could be at risk. Okay, so do I have to have a check through our recommended registered body, GBG? The answer is yes. We do not accept checks carried out through other registered bodies. And this causes a lot of grief and a lot of people who get very unhappy with me when I have to tell them this. There is a reason for this, because we have to follow guidance given out by the government and also by the Child Protection in Sport unit. We have to do that because of our funding. And there's also another very good reason. If you look at the DBS certificate, it's divided into various boxes, and the very last box on there actually says information released at the discretion of the Chief Constable. So that information, maybe somebody hasn't been convicted of something, but they may have been questioned, or there may have been something that the police or one of the agencies know about a person that will give them cause for concern if they're working with young children, vulnerable adults. If that's the case, then that is put in that box, and I've seen that happen on a number of occasions. In some circumstances, they won't put it on the DBS certificate at all, but release it in what we call the brown envelope. So it's sent as information to the registered provider, which in this case is GBG. It is not sent to anybody else. So if we say accepted a DBS check that was done through another sport or another company, we would never know if that information was there. So that has to be part of our risk assessment. And the guidance from Child Protection in Sport unit and the government is that it's too much of a risk not to follow their guidance. And just as an example, I'm sure many of you remember Ian Hartley and the two little girls in Soham who were murdered by him. He was the caretaker at the school. He had actually been questioned by the police on at least 4 occasions where allegations of rape have been made against him by girls. This all happened around the Hull area, but he'd never been found guilty. Nothing had ever been proven. Nothing had ever gone to court. That information wasn't issued. And if that information had been issued, he would never have been employed by the school as a caretaker. So effectively, they never saw that information. So that is why at that point, the law really started to change. Right, do I have to pay for my cheque? Well, if you're a volunteer, no. The cost of the cheque itself is free of charge. If you are paid as a coach or for whatever you do, then you have to pay, and it has just gone down by about, I think it's £2, so it's currently £36. There is an admin fee that you have to pay, which is not, we don't get anything. Table Tennis England get nothing. It all goes to GBG, who work on our behalf. And that's around, I think that's sort of around about £18 at the moment. And then the post office charge is £10.50 for the identity verification. So where and when do I pay? Well, once you've completed the form online, so it's a completely online process, we do not do paper applications at all. When you've done it online, and it is a really simple form, I think it took me about 5 minutes to do mine. At the end of it, there is a form you print off a sheet of paper that says what your evidence of identity is, which you've already entered on the online form. You take that with your identity evidence to your nearest post office normally one who deals with passports, and they will verify it for you, and you will pay for the whole process there. How long does it take? How long is a piece of string? If you haven't moved house within the last 5 years and you haven't got any convictions, it should really only take a couple of weeks at the most, maybe 3 if it's a busy time of the year. I had to redo one of my DBS checks because, like everybody else, I've got about 6 of them. And I had to redo it a few months ago, and actually I had it within the week. So that was pretty good. Do I have to send the certificate into to Table Tennis England? No, no, you don't. We ask that you upload it onto the membership database, but actually, technically, you don't even have to do that. But that's helpful if you do. GBG send us a spreadsheet every month which tells us which checks have been processed, and the database is updated accordingly. But if you can upload your certificate or a scanned copy of it when you get it, that's really helpful. The only time we will definitely ask you to scan the certificate and send it to me is if you have convictions, and I'll come on to what happens if you have convictions in a moment. So yeah, if you could just get it onto your membership database, and then that's fine. So how often should you be checked? Every 3 years is the government's advice, unless you're a member of the update service, and I'll come on to the update service in a moment. So what happens if I have convictions? Well, we deal with convictions on an individual basis. So what you would be asked to do, and you can preempt this if you choose, you'll be asked to send in or copy, scan, photocopy your certificate, your DBS certificate, and email it to me. If I go back to the Protection of Freedoms Act of 2012, when we had CRB checks, you used to get 2 certificates issued. One went to the applicant, one went to the registered provider. So what used to happen was the one that went to the registered provider, GBG, they would actually send me the copy if there were convictions on it, see it. But in 2012, the government decided that only 1 certificate would be issued, and that would only go to the applicant. So what now happens is GBG are advised by the DBS who's gone through the process, and unless a person is flagged and it says see paper disclosure, we know they're all clear. So if it says see paper disclosure, then I will contact the person concerned and ask to see their certificate. What happens then is we carry out a risk assessment, and that involves myself and the case management group, or in the case of coaches, the coaching manager, and we'll look to see what the conviction is. Because someone has a conviction does not necessarily mean we won't use them. It really depends on how long ago the conviction was and what the conviction was for. We will always ask the person to send us a statement, which we take into account when making our decision. So just because you have a conviction does not mean we won't allow you to coach or carry out your activity. And finally, what is the update service? Well, the update service was introduced in about 2012, early part 2013. And at first, it was a little bit of a disaster. So we actually didn't recommend and wouldn't accept it, but actually now it's fine and we will accept it, and we are now starting to promote it. What it is you have to first and foremost have taken out a DBS check through GBG. When you receive your certificate, you have, I think it's 15 working days to register with the DBS update service. If you do that, then they will ask you annually to re-register. If you're a volunteer, it's free of charge. So you just tell them, yes, carry on, carry on, carry on. If you are not a volunteer, it will cost you £13 a year to keep it going. But we will never ask you to undergo another DBS check unless something fundamentally changes on the certificate. So what happens is I'm the only person who can check this for Table Tennis England, because we're only allowed to nominate one person. I go onto the update service, I look on there, it will tell me whether or not there have been any changes on that person's DBS check since it was last checked. If there's no changes, fine, I will update the database, all well and good. If it flags up there's a change, then we have to go back to the person concerned. We will ask them what is the change, and we'll likely ask them to undergo an up-to-date DBS check. But if nothing changed, and that could be as simple as a change of address, I'm afraid. But if there's no changes, then it just rolls over, rolls over, rolls over. Okay, I think that's enough talking from me. Do we have any questions? And I will close this screen share. Lovely.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. There is one in the chat box, and yeah, I can see there's another question as well out there. Just how is it best to send information to Table Tennis England, I think, and if I haven't asked this question correctly, please feel free to clarify in the chat box. But yeah, how do we send information to Table Tennis England as if they're registered for updates?
Okay, yeah, if you're on the update service, you need to send to me obviously your name, your certificate number, not the authorization code, which is what so many people send me. It is the certificate number I need. If you're really feeling generous, if you send me your date of birth, that helps, because otherwise I have to look that up as well. So if I've got that information, I can go straight on. It takes me about 30 seconds. And then I will update the membership database accordingly.
Is there a time that's best to send that in, or is it just as soon as it's available?
Well, as soon as you know that your DBS check is up for, you know, your 3 years is up. Because even if you're on the update service and you're doing it year on year on year, we will still only ask you every 3 years to update your membership database.
Thanks, Judy. And Olive, did you have a question as well?
Yes, if I haven't forgotten what it is. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, Judy just said, it was one of the last things she said about updating the database. She said the update service, would they advise her of a change of address, or did I get that wrong?
No, they don't.
No, they don't. So it's up to the person to update their membership information on your database.
No, what happens is when I go on to check if the DBS check is okay, it will say to me there is new information. Now it won't tell me what that information is, so I don't know. So I will always, and that's in our guidance, ask you to undergo at that point a new DBS check. I mean, you might tell me it's a change of address, but I don't know that. And so it's all about that risk management again.
So how would they know I changed my address? Sorry, how would they know that I changed my address? And then they're telling you that
because you'll be asked to keep your information with them up to date.
with the update service.
With the update service.
Oh, I didn't realise there was
Sorry,
any.
yeah. Sorry, I
Right.
perhaps didn't make that clear.
So
yeah.
how do they communicate with us then?
Do you know, I honestly don't know, because I do mine. I haven't registered for the update service because I think it's just easier to do the check every 3 years, frankly. But that's my decision. I presume you register your email and they will contact you.
Right.
Details.
So really, it's really beneficial for people who have to pay for a DBS to join that service, because obviously then
it would work out cheaper.
But for volunteers, I guess it doesn't really matter. They can
Not really,
for it.
no.
Yeah.
No. But for someone who has to pay for a check, then it does work out a bit cheaper for them.
Okay, and I had another question. It was when you were talking about the GBG, and the police inform them. Do they see what convictions are on there, or did you say that you have to contact the person about their conviction? Sorry, I wasn't very clear about that.
Yeah, sorry. No, GBG don't get a certificate now either. That's part of the issue. I mean, we have asked the government to reinstate 2 certificates because it just makes my job so much simpler, but they won't.
So what information do they get then?
They just get like a spreadsheet from the DBS to say these have all been processed.
And does it say on there that the police have flagged it up because oh, they do, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And so then they flag it up with you.
They will then flag that to us, and I will then write directly to the person. And again, I've no idea what it is. It may just be that they've been convicted for drunk driving. That's not, it may not be. It won't necessarily be a sexual offence. It could be anything.
And do GBG see what the conviction is as well? No, they don't. No. They just know there's a red flag.
Yeah.
And then you ask the person to send in the certificate.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions in the chat box, but before we come to those, Ian, did you have a question?
Well, no, it's just a comment on the update service. You don't have to renew it every year. If you're a volunteer, it's automatic. I'm just looking at the email that I've received from the update service, which actually says if you're still using your DBS certificate as a volunteer, then you do not need to do anything to renew your subscription. This will happen automatically. So it happens automatically every year if you're a volunteer.
Yeah, yeah. Good. I never see that side of it, you see.
Okay, so should everyone who is required to have a DBS check have attended a safeguarding course as well?
No, they're not. I mean, if you want a coach license, then you have to have your coaching qualification, you have to have attended a safeguarding workshop, and you must have an up-to-date DBS check. But the DBS check and the safeguarding workshop do not go together. They are 2 completely separate things.
And are schools allowed to take copies of certificates?
Now, that's a very interesting one. They may, but they may only keep them for 6 months, maximum of 6 months, then they have to destroy them. We cannot keep certificates. When you put your DBS certificate onto the membership database, when you upload the certificate, once I've checked it, it automatically deletes. So because we can't. So when I ask for people to email me in a scanned copy of their certificate, I do what I have to do with it, and then I delete it. If they send me a paper copy, I will shred it. We are not allowed by law, nobody is allowed to keep a copy of a DBS check for more than 6 months.
Cool. Sorry to jump back a little bit. I know we just mentioned, you mentioned safeguarding if you're going for a coach license. Is it worth just mentioning the sort of safeguarding that we do accept, the courses that we do accept for the coach license?
Okay, the one we would always recommend is the UK coaching course, Safeguarding and Protecting Children. It's a really good course. And what we generally say is you have to do a face-to-face workshop initially, and then after that you can do the e-learning. The only e-learning we accept, there's 2 courses we accept, and that is the UK coaching one and the one available through the Child Protection in Sport unit. In terms of the actual workshop, if you're doing something that is not the UK coaching one, and there are a lot out there, and they're all very, very good, the face-to-face ones, I assess each one on its merits. So if it isn't the UK coaching, I would recommend that you ask me first, and email me and say, this is on the agenda, is this okay? And I will say, yes, that's fine, or no, it isn't. See, what happens is a lot of local authorities, a lot of active partnerships will, and a lot of other sports will do safeguarding workshops. They're all fun, all of those are fundamentally the UK coaching one, just branded differently. So they're going to be fine. What does happen sometimes is schools will sometimes do a course which is really not relevant to a coach. It might be relevant to a teaching assistant. And I've just seen Kevin put something up through the safeguarding board. Yes, that's fine, provided it covers the things we need it to cover. And that's fundamentally what is safeguarding, recognising abuse, different types of abuse, what to do if you've got concerns, how to manage a situation. Yeah, basically that. Does that help?
Thanks, Judy. Okay, a couple of questions coming through about who needs to have DBS checks, specifically within a club environment. So the first question is, do all volunteers require a DBS to volunteer within a club?
No, and you can't legally ask them to undergo a check. Coaches, absolutely, without a doubt. No chance there. In terms of the volunteer, it depends what their role is. If they are, again, meeting the criteria for regulated activity, so if they are taking direct responsibility for a group of young children or vulnerable adults, and for these purposes, a child in law is defined as under 18, under the Children's Act of 2004, then they must have a check if they are doing it once a week or 4 times a month. Then they should undergo a check because they're taking direct responsibility for those people. Or if it's an overnight stay, for example, if someone volunteers to travel with the coach to look after a group, a team, a squad who might be playing Junior British League or a tournament or something, and it requires an overnight stay and the parents are not going to be there, not taking responsibility for their children, then the people who are travelling and taking that responsibility because it's overnight should all be DBS checked.
There's a couple of specific examples as well, actually, that it's perhaps worth addressing. So should an adult player who is a sparring partner in junior sessions have a DBS check if it's just an ad hoc sparring partner a couple of times a month?
Not necessary, because they're not taking responsibility. it is the coach or whoever's running the session that's taking the responsibility. So just being a sparring partner, because they're not looking after the child. They shouldn't be doing anything of a personal nature for the child. They're literally just hitting a ball.
And what if it's a relative? So if it's a family member, a child that you're regularly travelling with?
I mean, if it's my child, I mean, when my daughter Gina was doing the circuit, I mean, I went with her, so I didn't have to be checked. She's my daughter. We shared a hotel room. She's my daughter. That's absolutely fine. It's if, and in some instances, maybe I would take another child with me and take responsibility for them. Then I would need to be checked because that is not my child.
Okay. And how do we know if coaches or volunteers' DBS checks need to be renewed? Who tells the club or who tells us that needs to happen?
Well, we did discuss some of this with last week with the role of the welfare officer, and I did say actually that that's something that is in the role description for the welfare officer, to ensure that they know all the coaches operating in the club and they've got that sort of information so they can remind them. In terms of our database, I'm pretty certain actually that sends out a reminder to people that it's time to renew their DBS. I think I saw Alid coming online. He probably knows, he can probably confirm that that is the case.
Yeah, I was hoping not to come on, to be honest, but yeah, if your DBS and your safeguarding is on the database, on TT membership, then you'll get a reminder. I think it's 6 months in advance, and then a few weeks in advance, and then on the day it runs out. So you do get a number of reminders, but obviously it needs to be on our TT membership then.
Thanks, Alid.
No problem.
Sorry, can I come in here on that point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask a question? So, as welfare officer, people have shown me and emailed me their DBS certificates.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mistakenly have been holding, a copy of those. So, from what you're saying is I can only do that for 6 months.
Yeah.
So it falls to my responsibility to make a note of when the coaches and volunteers DBS checks run out, yes, and check it against the database of TTE so that we know that information. Mm-hmm. So obviously the coaches and volunteers will get informed that they need to renew. What if they don't renew? Should I be telling them that they need to renew as well, or just leave it, or what do you suggest?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would chase them up and tell them they need to renew. If they don't renew, then they won't be able to renew their coach licence if it's not up to date. Is that, Alid will back me up on that?
Yeah, so I think with the DBS, it's difficult for us to go around and police everybody because obviously the number of staff we've got is very minimal. So it's difficult for us. So I think obviously one of the importance of the coach license should be up there, but I think it's great to get the clubs maybe taking a bit of responsibility as well on the coaches that they use. I know we've got the Find a Coach page that is being updated. So we're getting a new website. So the Find a Coach and Find the Club page will, from what I remember, will merge into one. So that will show the list of the club with the coaches they have, and it will only show the licensed coaches. So I think it's a bit of an incentive as well then for coaches and clubs to kind of update all those coaches who have a license. But yeah, on our Find a Coach, that will only show licensed coaches. At the moment, it doesn't really point out what club they're related to. It'll just show a licensed coach. But in the future, with the new widget, hopefully it'll show the clubs they're related to as well. And so hopefully there's a bit more incentive for clubs to make sure that those coaches are up to date.
Can I just ask then, should I even have to see a DBS from one of our coaches or volunteers?
No.
Or surely I shouldn't even have. No, that's what I'm thinking now. I don't need to, but I
No.
need to check on the TTE database that they've got, that you've got it.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
they're a coach, you can type their name in to find a coach, and if they appear on there, that means they've got their coach license in place. That's if they're a coach. If they've got their
Coach
coach
license wouldn't necessarily tell me that they've renewed their DBS, would it?
not DBS, but
Ask.
No.
Just email me. If you
Yeah.
email me,
I have checked some of them quite recently, actually. So I know I can do that. So I guess that makes my job easier. I don't need to see them. I just need to check that they're all up to date, like every now and again, maybe, or keep a list somewhere so that I know so and so's coming up for renewal, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, put it into a spreadsheet with a date so that you can just remind them.
Yeah.
If you have got any DBS, sorry if I looked taken away. It's typical, isn't it? I could hear someone knocking at my front door, and it was my younger son who's just texted me because he's got a flat in the same block where I live to say, can I borrow some cheese, please? I just texted him back and said, I'm doing a live webinar, go away.
Oh, typical.
In terms of that, get a spreadsheet, put the dates on, but you don't need to do the checking. If there's anything
I'll
untoward,
destroy all those that I've got now, actually. Thank you.
I will. If you're holding any DBS checks that are more than 6 months old, shred them. Even if they're photocopies, scanned copies, shred them.
Okay. Well, they're on my computer, so
Delete them.
yeah, okay. I thought you wanted me to print them off and then shred them, and I'm thinking, oh,
No.
that'll
Just
work.
delete it.
Okay, all right. That's great. Thanks, Judy.
Martin, did you have a question? Yeah,
Am I unmuted?
you are.
Apologies for my appearance, but I've come in from the garden and I've just had a shower. What would the blueprint be for a club, say, with 20 juniors, one coach, weekly sessions, but obviously there is the possibility of the coach either playing in a match or not turning up? I'm the welfare officer, therefore the coach obviously should be DBS checked. The welfare officer presumably should be DBS checked.
No, not necessarily.
No, you'd be.
No, I'm not DBS checked for Table Tennis England, and I'm the safeguarding manager because I don't have any contact with children.
Well,
people.
Yeah, I do, because supposing the coach doesn't turn up, he's a university student, so he has a propensity to do that. But then I thought, I'm not a coach, but I'm in the situation where the 20 kids are there.
And you're taking responsibility.
Yeah, in some way, I will be taking the session or help getting something.
Goes back to the regulated activity. If it's something that happens irregularly, like once a month, it's something, as you say, he hasn't turned up, so you've had to step in or someone else has had to, then no. I mean, what I would say to you is always, even if you're a coach with a DBS, always make sure you're protecting yourself. I mean, never be in the hall as the only adult with a whole group of children. No. Always have a second adult present at all times.
I guess one of the things I've called on, which you'll probably raise your eyes about, is we obviously have a few parents around, and I always go searching for someone who's DBS checked. And I say, look, we're short tonight, you're DBS checked, but presumably you're going to say that has no relevance to table tennis because it's not a Table Tennis England.
No, because we can't check it. So there could be something on there. So they might not do, but it's not something that's happening regularly.
No.
And this goes back to what I'm saying, is let's keep what a DBS check is in perspective. It's a snapshot in time. It just tells you on this particular date that person has no convictions. I mean, if my DBS check, I can tell you, is completely clear. Okay, I could get a new one done today. It would still be completely clear. I could go out tomorrow and abuse a child. I'm not going to, I promise you. But I can give you, I could hand in to Alid and say, Alid, I want to be a coach. Here's my DBS check. It's through GBG and it's dated yesterday. So it will be up to date, all in order, you know, and you wouldn't know that I'd abused a child. So it's about doing the other things that go with it, which is, you know, as a club, if a new coach comes along, you should be looking for references. Where have they operated before? You know, ring up that club and say, you know, is this person okay? And that sort of thing. So do your other checks as we recommend in our safeguarding guidelines. So just keep DBS checks in perspective, and also think about protecting yourselves. But the only time legally you can ask someone to undergo a check is if they meet the criteria for regulated activity, or they are in a role, i.e. a coach, where they're in a position of trust. And sadly, we failed again last week in the Commons to get coaches put on the same level as teachers. We've been, sports have been fighting this for 12 years. And unfortunately, the government turned us down again, where we wanted coaches put on exactly the same footing as teachers, so that it is illegal for a teacher to have a relationship with an under 18 for whom they have some sort of responsibility. They won't do the same thing for coaches, but nevertheless a coach is in a position of trust.
So just to ask or clarify the other way round, if I'm DBS checked, as we'll say, the welfare officer, but the coach isn't, that doesn't really hold water because he's doing a regular position, so therefore he needs to be DBS checked. Yeah. He
should not be coaching unless he has a DBS check. Thank you for nodding, Alid.
Not even with me present. No.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. So just a question about coaching in schools. So if you're coaching in a school, should there always be another responsible adult as well in the hall? And should that person be DBS checked?
Okay, they're not taking responsibility, so the answer is no, they don't need to be. If you're coaching in a school, if it's during school hours, then there should be generally a teacher or someone like that that is there or round about. If it's an after school club, unless you know there's going to be a teacher present, I would generally try to make sure there is a, you know, that you have got a second adult with you, because I have had to deal with incidences where coaches have been running an after school club on their own and something has occurred and the child has accused them of doing something that they clearly haven't done. And I have to say, in the 7 or 8 cases I've had to manage, we've managed to get to the truth, but it's destroyed that coach's career for ever going into the school again, so they've had to be deployed elsewhere. So having a second adult present is your protection.
Okay. I don't think there's any other questions in the chat box at the moment, and no one is waving at me like they want to ask a question. Is there anything else to add?
Get the teas out the fridge then and give it to my son, who's probably waiting to have his lunch.
Okay, if there's no more questions on that one, then we'll hold it there. Judy, do you have anything else you wanted to add at the end, or?
No, just thank you for everybody. I know a lot of people are new people are here today. We've got a lot more today than we've had on other ones, but also we've had some people that have been here for all 3 of the webinars, which has been really useful. If anybody would like more information or would like a webinar on another area of safeguarding that we haven't done, then just let me know, email me, because that's the one good thing I think that the positive that's come out of this horrible situation we find ourselves in is that virtual platforms
Absolutely. And also, just before we go, I'm sure that many of you will have seen the Ready to Return statement on the Table Tennis England website yesterday. Our Head of Development, Greg, is here as well on this call. So I'm just going to invite Greg to unmute and say a few words before we head off.
Hi everyone, hope you're all well. I thought as a lot of you are on the call, it would be useful to provide just a quick update on where we are at. We are going to release an additional statement later today, but thank you, Judy. That was really interesting on the workshop as well. Learned a few things, or reminded me of a few things that I've perhaps forgotten. Obviously, following the announcement yesterday from Boris, it's we've been a frustrating couple of days, I think it's fair to say. I think the whole sports sector had anticipated a return on the 4th of July, and it was only late on Monday evening that there was, we didn't hear till Tuesday morning, but there was word to Sport England that that would not be the case, and sport, well, certainly indoor sport and leisure facilities would not be able to reopen on the 4th of July, which is obviously very frustrating for all involved. And lobbying continues from Sport England, the Sport and Recreation Alliance, and national governing bodies to try and encourage a safe opening of facilities as soon as is possible. I think there's an element of, we need to continue to look at the big picture and take that into account, that it's probably only another few weeks, hopefully. They've indicated that the Secretary of State has indicated that mid-July is the new date we need to look towards. That's no kind of confirmed kind of roadmap at all, but it's just a tweet he put out after the announcement. But mid-July, I guess, could mean anything from the 12th to the 25th, 26th of July, so it's still very up in the air, I guess. The guidance on indoor sports or facilities returning, so the additional guidance was due out on the 13th of June. It got delayed, and I guess that was probably an indication of things to come from the statement on Tuesday. But we are obviously pushing for that to be released, as with everyone else, as soon as possible, so we can help update our guidance and help update you to help to get prepared as to return. But we continue to update guidance and stuff online, so please do keep visiting the website on the Ready to Return section, where we'll continue to upload the latest kind of guidance. The one that we will be changing today or tomorrow is around kind of use of balls, for example. It was initially thought that you would need to keep swapping or bring your own balls and use different marks or orange and white balls. It seems as though that that has now been eased out. So we're hoping, we don't believe at this stage that will be required, but balls will still need to be washed or cleaned regularly. So that's one thing that may help clubs return. We have webinars tomorrow for clubs and leagues. I know a number of you, from looking at the names, are booked on. So we look forward to seeing you there. Despite the lack of clarity, we feel it's helpful to still run those. We'll run through the guidance that is available, answer any questions that you have, and then try and provide as much clarity as possible. Just lastly on this, there was this kind of indication that community centres were reopening, which is the case, but in the latest documents we've received this morning, sport and fitness shouldn't return in those community centres. So I think there was a glimmer of hope for some that they might be able to return, but unfortunately sports and fitness in community centres and those types of halls are not recommended to come back at this stage. So we need to continue to be patient, unfortunately, and thank you for everyone that's doing a sterling job keeping everyone engaged in your own clubs, and we'll keep working with you all to try and keep you as up to date as possible. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. And yeah, the link for tomorrow's session hasn't been sent out as yet, but that will go out this afternoon. And as Greg said, we're going to do 2 sessions. So there'll be one in the morning at 10:30 and one at 1 o'clock at the planned time anyway. So there'll be 2 options to choose from. Cool.
Can I just also flag up something completely nothing to do with safeguarding that we're hoping to do towards the end of July, which will be a live webinar style chat. I'm going to be talking with Will Bailey and Jack Hunter-Spivey probably, and possibly Sean Marples, and we're going to be talking about disabled table tennis and Paralympics and how we got to where we are today. So we're in the process of setting that up. It should be really interesting. We'll probably look to do that live streaming sort of maybe early evening time when people are not working, so we get more people. So hopefully towards the end of July. So watch the Table Tennis England page for more information.
Cool. Thank you. And thanks everyone for this afternoon, for all the questions and all the engagement. And thanks Judy, of course, for coming along and delivering the session as well. I hope everyone found it useful. And for those that have booked on the sessions tomorrow, we'll see you then. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thanks.